Okay, we're going to go ahead and talk about the lab, or lab 6. I'm going to walk you through getting this set up so that you can be successful with this lab. This lab should be relatively easy. There's not a lot of code you have to write, but I want to make sure that you get this one done, because next week we're going to have another lab that's going to be a little more complex, that's going to be using this for some other things. All right, so this is graphics with SDL. And so we're going to use C language, but rather than having a console app, which is printing out text and doing things, we're actually going to do some graphical stuff. And to do that, we're going to use this library called SDL. So let's go ahead and dig in. Now, what SDL is, it's a library that stands for Simple Direct Media Layer, which is what SDL is. I don't know why it's not SDML, because it has media in there, but direct media, they combined as one word. So SDL, Simple Direct Media Layer. And it was designed to be a cross-platform library, which means that there's a build of SDL that works in Linux, one that works in Windows, one that works on Mac. And the idea is that the library performs or has functions for performing access to do graphical things, like drawing things in a window, putting pixels on there, getting pixels off of there, doing things with audio, and then also handling things like with input, like mouse, keyboard, things like that. And really, SDL was originally created for creating like kind of like a video player software. Like if you've ever used something like any one of the numerous video players, like media players, like a DVD player software or something like that, that's playing back like high frame rate stuff without any lag. SDL was written to do that. It was written in C, and it was designed to be fairly simple to use and also very fast, like most things written in C. SDL also has found a home for use in a lot of gaming projects, including commercial games, even AAA titles that you may have played or seen. Half-Life 2, beautiful game. Team Fortress 2, Counter-Strike franchise titles, those are all Valve titles, so really AAA titles, top-notch games. Those actually used SDL in them. There are a lot of other smaller titles too, puzzle games, things like that use SDL. But SDL has been around for a while. It's actually completely written in C, very fast. It also has bindings in other languages, so you can access it from things like Python. It has a wrapper around the C stuff, so it's still fast. And actually, a lot of you have probably used SDL before without knowing it. So, for example, if you're in the gaming degree and you used Pygame, a lot of the Pygame functionality is behind the scenes done in C in SDL. So, for example, when you're blitting surfaces and they're showing up on the screen and you're playing back audio and you're doing things like that, drawing the shapes, pygame.draw.circle, those things, a lot of those are behind the scenes done using SDL. Even managing the window surface and things like that. Okay, now first off, to download it, it is free. So it's free as in speech and free as in beer. Free as in speech basically means that all the source code, you have access to it. You can do what you want with it. It's not controlled. It's not owned by anybody. So you can actually download the entire source code to the entire project if you want to. If you want to change it and do what you want with it, you're free to do whatever you want. The license is very open with it. It's also free as in beer, which means you don't have to pay anything to use it. You can download it for free, use it for free, put it in your projects, build your own commercial games around it. All free. You don't owe them any licensing fee. You don't owe them anything for doing that. And you can download it from libsdl.org. And if you go to their download site, there's a little button you click on to download it. It'll go to this page, just download 2.0. And then from there, if you're using CodeBlocks, there's a number of download options there, which we'll look at here in a second. But the one that you're going to want is the development libraries. If you're building a game, if you've already built a game and want to distribute it and have people just be able to use it, they don't need all the development libraries. They just need the DLLs. So you can get those, but you also can get the development libraries, which have the header files you need, the library files that are already compiled for you to use, any of the pound and include the headers, any of that stuff. It's all included in this development library version. So you can just download that one. So this is the one that you're going to want. And then after you download that, what you're going to want to do is unzip that to some place on your machine. So for example, you could put it in C:/SDL, but really what I did on mine is I just left it in the downloads directory and unzipped it there. And because we're going to copy files out of that into our CodeBlocks install, so if you want to have it still hanging around later, you can, but I just put mine in the downloads directory, left it there, unzipped it right there, and then extracted the files I need and put them into my CodeBlocks setup. All right, now, it's kind of a weird file format. It's called a tar.gz, which GZ is like a free version of zip. It's the GNU, the GNU Free Software Foundation version of zip files. And .tar is like an older format of file that was designed to be for tape archive, which is what tar stands for. But it was designed to take a whole bunch of files, combine them together into one file, and then GZ then zips that. So it's in this weird tar.gz. But if you don't have something that can unzip that, 7-zip is a freely available program you can download for free. It won't nag you with constant screen saying that buy me, buy me, buy me. So if you want to use 7-zip, I believe that it's free for personal use, so you can download that and install that and use it. Essentially, after you've unzipped those file contents, you're going to need to copy the development files from that expanded zip file into the correct locations of your compiler. So here are the steps for that, and then I'm going to show you that here in a second. So you're going to go into that unzipped folder, and you're going to find the stuff that's in this x86 64 w64 min-gw32 directory. And inside of that folder or directory, there's going to be a bin folder, an include folder, and a lib folder. So what you're going to do is you're going to copy everything that's in the bin folder, and I would do that just by doing Control-A to select all, Control-C to copy, and then you're going to switch to the bin folder of your min-gw installation for CodeBlocks, where the compiler actually lives. And that's going to be in the same x86_64w32 kind of directory inside of, but the one inside of CodeBlocks, and you're going to do a Control-V and paste that in there. And then you're going to do the same thing for the include directory. You can do the same thing for the lib directory. So in other words, we're going to copy all the bin files from bin to the bin directory of the compiler, all the files from the include folder to the include folder for the compiler, all the lib files from the lib thing from the zip to the lib folder. And then after we're done with that, we're now ready to create a project. So start CodeBlocks, create, and rather than an empty project, to make this a little easier, I would just say create a new console application. And that way you'll get the kind of hello world thing already created for you. And then what you're going to do is make sure to select that as a C project, give the project a name. You could call this one Lab 6 or whatever you want to call it, and then generate the project. Now that's going to bring up the normal window with just #include standard io.h, printf hello world, that kind of shell. We're going to replace that with something else in a little bit, but there's one more step that we need to do to get this compiler set up to work with SDL when we go to use SDL. And that is under project properties, we need to click on the command button that's projects build options. And under there's going to be a tab that says linker settings. And under there's a thing that we're going to have to click that says other linker options. And in that little, under that other linker options pane, there's a place to type in stuff. And what we're going to type in there is -L min-gw32, -L SDL2 main, and -L SDL2. Now the reason for these, that -L means this is another library that we need to link to. It's not one of the standard ones that's built into C. So we need to tell it specifically, hey, when you compile this, I want you to link so that we're using these things that are necessary to build this SDL project. In other words, that tells the compiler for this project, I'm going to be using this SDL2 library, this SDL2 main library, and this min-gw32 library, which is necessary for these two to work. So now we're ready to write some code. Here's a little sample project that I'm going to walk you through. I know this font is a little small here, but I wanted to fit it all on one screen, so just bear with me here. Maybe zoom in on parts of it as I go through it. But you'll notice the first thing we have to do is we're going to #include SDL2/SDL.h. That's the only additional thing we need to #include. I also went ahead and included standard IO because I do have a printf down here that's printing out an error message. And one here, if it wasn't able to initialize SDL, it's printing something out. So we have those two. Notice there's nothing else that we have up here except this SDL2 slash SDL.h included. And then here I just made a couple global variables, one for screen width and screen height. I'm setting it up to 800 by 600. Those don't have to be global, so could be local variables. And here I could have hard-coded those, but I did it this way so you could see if you want to change the resolution of the window, you could actually just change these here very easily and get a different window size. Now, heading into main, ignore the argument stuff that's on here, but we'll go ahead and put that there. That's so you can pass things into your main. We haven't talked about that yet, but we'll just put that there now. Now, the next thing we have here is this SDL underscore window pointer. Now, this is actually behind the scenes a structure that's going to keep track of some things about the window. Think of it kind of like the display surface if you've done programming in Pygame, or a handle to the actual window that's going to show up on the screen. Now, we're starting it off as null right now, saying, well, there is no window right now. And we're also going to create this SDL surface. That surface is the screen surface. That's more like the display surface in Pygame, but that's going to be connected to that window. And we're also starting that as null, meaning that we have not created a window. We have not created a surface yet. Now, the first thing that I do before I can do anything else in SDL is I call SDL init, and I pass SDL init video. So SDL init video is kind of, we're saying, initialize the video part of the SDL. And think of that as like pygame.init that you have for initializing Pygame when you use it, if you've used that library. But in our case, we just have to do that. And if it initializes correctly, then that will produce something that's 0 or greater. If it's less than 0, there was an error. In other words, if we get a negative number out of that, it was an error. If otherwise, then we have now initialized SDL. Now we create our window. We set this window variable up here equal to whatever's returned from this create window function here. And notice we're passing into the window function, kind of the title of this SDL tutorial thing, the window position undefined, meaning put it wherever Windows decides to. And then notice we have this screen width and screen height. That's saying this is how wide we want the window to be, how tall we want it to be, and then bring it up so it shows it the first time. So that creates the window. And if that succeeds, then we get down here, and down here we then say, well, now I have a window. Let's get the surface of that window. So go to that window, extract the surface. Now that we have a surface, we can do stuff by drawing to that window. And in this case, all I do is I fill that window rectangle. This null means the entire window. And then I have this map RGB thing where I'm passing in red, green, and blue made in bright white. So all white, you might be used to that. So red maxed out, green maxed out, blue maxed out. I'm going to get a white window. And then I call this SDL update window surface. That's kind of like pygame.display.update. That will show up on the screen. And then I call this SDL delay, which waits for 5,000 milliseconds or 5 seconds. And then it will destroy the window and then quit. So think of this as a combination of these two. Is like if you've done Pygame, pygame.display.quit. Close the window, shut everything down. So this is a relatively small program, but it gets a window up on the screen. It works, and you can just kind of copy and paste this directly from the assignment sheet, or you could copy and paste this from the slides that are posted, and make sure that your compiler is set up and working. Now, let me go through that process of how you're going to download this and install it. And to save a little time, I actually have already downloaded these. So let me switch the window over so you can see essentially the process for doing this. So hold on, let me show my display. Okay, so here's the display. And let me move this to where you can see both of these a little better. Okay, so what you'll do, or what you should notice here is, first off, this is just my downloads directory. And then I took that tar.gz file, and let me go up one directory. I took that, and here, let me show you this whole thing. Let me go and delete that, and I'll do it again here. I can't, I have something open in there. Oh, I know what it is. Let's close that. Now let me try to delete it again. Okay, so let me show you how you are going to unzip this. So if you right-click this, you can go to 7-zip. you can say extract here to that. I'll click that. That has now extracted that to that directory that says .tar. I'm going to open that. Now here's the tar file inside that. Right click that again, say 7-zip again, say extract here to that. And now we have this new folder, and now this has the stuff in there. So when we click into this SDL2 folder, you'll notice here's the stuff that's in there. Now one quick word of caution is that inside of here are two different builds of this. This one down here, this x86_64, that's the 64-bit build. In other words, if you have the 64-bit version of CodeBlocks installed, you're going to want to get your files from that one. If you have the 32-bit version of CodeBlocks installed, you're going to want to get them from this. So the instructions on the lab sheet, the instructions that we went through on the thing are for the 64-bit, which is the version of CodeBlocks I've installed. But you're going to want to follow the same process, but just use the folder here that matches the one for your CodeBlocks directory. And as you'll see, let's leave this here and let's look at where CodeBlocks is installed. So over here in this other window, on my C drive is where my CodeBlocks is, and it's in Program Files. So I'm going to go in that. And in Program Files, there's the CodeBlocks directory. And inside of that, there's the MinGW directory where the compiler lives. So if I go inside of there, now you'll notice I have this x86-64-W64 MinGW32 directory. So that means that I want to copy the files from this into here. So let me show you how to do that. So I'm going to go in there, and you'll notice that if I go into each of these, that this is the one for CodeBlocks, is on the right. This is the one for the library. But notice there's a bin directory, an include directory, and a lib directory. So what you're going to do is you're going to go into the bin directory in each of these. And I've already installed this, so it might, here, let me delete that back out. Okay, so here's the bin directory, and let me actually delete these out as if it was, I hadn't already done this before. Or I suppose I could just replace them. Here, let me just replace them. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to the one you're copying from, do a Control-A, Control-C, go to the one you're copying to, do a Control-V, and then we can just replace those files that are in there. It might warn you that you need to be administrator if you're not just allowed to be administrator and do that. Now notice all we've really done is just copied two files from this, the downloaded library, into the compiler's bin directory. So now it can access this DLL. And then this config file is used by that DLL when it actually runs. Now go up a directory in both of these, and now do the same thing for the include directories. The include directory just has this SDL2 folder. Control-A, Control-C, click over here, Control-V, I'll just say replace. And that's going to copy all of the stuff for the SDL2. And notice when it's done, you should see that SDL2 folder over here. There it is. And inside of that are all the header files for the SDL stuff that we're going to use. All right, now again, go up a directory in each, go into the lib folder in each. Now, copy all these, Control-A, Control-C, come over here, Control-V, sure, let's replace all those. And now we have all the libraries that have already been compiled for us, and now they're all installed in CodeBlocks. Okay, so now let's go to CodeBlocks and look at what you need to do to set that up. So here, let me create a new project and show you how to do this. So let's say File, New, Project. Let's just do a console application. Next, C. And I'm going to say my project title, SDL test. And I already have something called that, so I'm just going to overwrite it. And apparently I should make something new because this still has the old code in it. Here, let me make a new one. Let's do close project, new project, console application. Let me give it a name, or give it a, tell it a C, give it a project title, SDL test. Here, I'll call it SDL test 2. Finish. Okay, now we have our source. If we go to main, it looks like that. But we don't want that. We want the thing from the the slides. So let me just quickly switch over to the slides and copy that. So I'm just going to copy this program out of the slides here. Let me just do Control A, Control C. And you can do this right off the slides or right out of the program from the lab sheet. And now we're back into here. I'm going to do a Control A, delete that, Control V, and now I have my program in there. Now, if you have it like this, and you try to build this, let me show you what happens. Okay, notice it says undefined references to SDL in it. And you might think at this point, well, we've done something wrong with setting up SDL, but it's not finding any of the things. And that's because by default, the compiler does not know to look in those other libraries. So we need to tell it, we need to look in those other libraries. So to do that, again, go to Project, go to Properties, and then when you're under Project Properties, there's this Projects Build Options button down here in the bottom corner right above the OK and Cancel button there. So you're going to click on that, and that brings up this window with all these build options. Now you don't have to worry about what all these do. The only part we really need to do is go and click on the Linker Settings tab, which is the second one over. So click on that. And then here's this other linker options, and that's where we want to paste in those other things. And again, if you want to, we could get that right out of the slides or right out of the thing. And here, let me just copy that real quick. All right, so the things that we want to paste in there are going to look like that. TAC L MinGW32, TAC L SDL2 main. Make sure you put that these might be case sensitive on your machine, so make sure the case is right. And after we do that, we're just going to say OK. We're going to say OK. And now let's rebuild this. So I'm going to click on this button. Here, let me make sure you can see that. Click on this. Actually, you can't see what I'm doing here, unfortunately. All right, let me pull that down. Apparently that was being cut off. So let me show you quickly what I did. So I went to, here, let me make this so it fits on the screen, right? And I'll show you one more time here. Okay, now you can see the whole thing. So I went to Project. I went to Properties. From there, I clicked on Projects Build Options. From there, I clicked on Linker Settings. And then in Linker Settings, I put this stuff in here. -L MinGW32 space -L SDL2 main space -L SDL2. And then I say OK. I say OK. And now let's try building this again. So I'm going to click on the Build and Run button. And now you notice it runs, and I get my SDL window that says SDL tutorial, because that's what I told it to put there. And then it closes, and the program is done. So notice if I want to make this say something else, I can make the window title say something else. But this gets you up to the point where now you're ready to do the lab. All right, so that's what you need to do to get SDL up and running. If you get a weird Windows error where it says it was unable to start the application, that probably means you copied the 64-bit library files and header files and development files into the 32-bit directory, or put the 32-bit ones into the 64-bit directory. But if you get the right files into the right place, when you follow this step, this will compile and it'll run. And again, this was the 64-bit version. The other option you would have is to, if you have the 32-bit version, uninstall it and install the 64-bit version. If you go to the codeblocks.org and download CodeBlocks, there'll be one that says 32-bit toward the bottom. Well, the one that doesn't say if it's 32 or 64 that's up higher, that's the 64-bit one. So just download that one. Okay, and again, looking at what this code does, it basically creates the window, gets the surface from the window, fills it in with white. You see that, and one thing to notice, like if you want to play around with this, like what if we want a different color? Let's change it to, here, let's put this at 00. So now FF00 for the color. Let's build and run. And now you notice we get this yellow window instead of the white window. And then 5 seconds later, it goes away. Now, a couple things that you're going to want to look at for the lab. Let's go back to the lab sheet just temporarily here, and I'll get you situated with that. So here we are back to the lab. And notice that the lab tasks, once you get the sample program working, and I gave you that code so that you have a starting place where everything works, what you're going to need to do is modify it so that when you click the X on the upper corner of the window, it closes the window. So that's the first thing. And the way you're going to do that is there's this SDL pull event function that you're going to use, and you're going to get the event out of that. And there's a special SDL quit event type that happens for that. So what I would, if I were you, I would Google this pull event type and SDL quit, or go to the sdllib.org. There's a whole documentation section, but I would Google these two things and get that. The second thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to have, so when the user presses the escape key, it exits. So they need to quit with the X or quit with the escape key. And again, there's some hints there for that. If you use that SDL get keyboard state, there's a SDL scan code escape that you can use with that. And again, this will seem similar if you're used to using Pygame or if you've used Pygame in the past. So anyway, I would Google these things and see if you can figure that out. There's also a way to do this with keyboard events, where you get a key down event for whatever key you're interested in, and then you can take an action based on that. But I'll let you try to puzzle this out and use Google and sdllib.org's documentation to figure that out. The last thing is, if you can detect the escape key, then you can just detect the R key. When you press the R, just pick a randomly selected color to put to change the screen to. And you already kind of have the code, and I just showed you how to change it from white to yellow. But think about how you had generated random numbers previously in C. Think about how you would generate a random number between 0 and 255. Maybe use the mod operator, %, to do that. That's something that we have talked about and done before, so that shouldn't be too outlandish. But really, the amount of code you need to add for these is just a few lines of code. There's not a whole lot of stuff you need to do to add this stuff. And then what you're going to do is you're going to compile that, get that working. Once you're done with it, submit it. It really should be, you should be able to get all this done today if you actually work on it. Other than that, next class we're going to have cover another thing with C, and we're going to also talk about the next lab. And if you want to get a head start on that over the weekend, we're going to be converting our Game of Life program into something that's graphical. And as a way of thinking about that is notice that if you can draw little boxes on the screen, little tiny rectangles, wherever you want on the screen, then you can do the stuff that you need to do to draw the Game of Life board. We're going to essentially, the Game of Life code that you had before is all pretty much going to be the same. The only thing that's going to be different is that kind of display board function. We're going to have it do some graphical things. And then there's going to be a chance for some bonus points in that lab. So if you want to get started and figure out how to do some stuff, what I would start with is figure out how to make a rectangle other than the entire screen like we're doing here. Figure out how to make the entire screen white, and then put a little rectangle somewhere in there that's a different color, because that's what you're going to need to do for the Game of Life lab. So if you want to get started on that, feel free to do that. And other than that, that's all for today. I would strongly suggest you work on that lab. And as another quick reminder of what we're doing for the final exam, since all of you need to be off campus and you're not coming back after the Thanksgiving break, we are having the final paper part of the final exam before you leave for break. So that's going to be the final exam for this class. I'm going to give, let's see, this is a Tuesday, Thursday class, so that's going to be on the 19th. So 1 week from today is the final exam, the paper part of the final exam. And I will post a study guide on the 16th and along with that Game of Life lab. But the things that I'm going to cover on the final exam, the paper part of the final exam will be everything we've covered up to this point. The actual final exam for the lab part, that will be after you get back from break. So that will be the final exam week, which will be, the 7th through the 11th or whatever it is. But we'll have that lab part of it separate, and that'll be kind of like a take-home test with more time than you would normally have had for the in-class part. So just make sure to look for that as well. So the paper part is all you're going to be taking next week. So you should have a little less time pressure on you. There are a few more things that I want to cover, and I'm going to cover some more things after break as well. I know things have been rough this semester, but try to bear with me. And I am also going to post a little kind of bonus lab, and there will be bonus points on that Game of Life lab. So if you had some trouble on the midterm, make sure to pay attention and see if you can get those bonus things done, because the lab being the largest percentage of the grade, you get bonus points there that overflows onto the other areas. So that can help out a lot. But you do have to pass the final to pass the class, so keep that in mind. Okay, so that's it for today. We'll stop there, and let me know if you have any problems. If you do have trouble installing CodeBlocks, again, follow those directions, and if you get stuck and there's something that doesn't seem right and you followed it exactly the way that I just showed you there, then let me know. Maybe we can do a Zoom and you can share your screen and I can look at what you've done, make sure that it's working. But really, if you follow those instructions that are on the lecture or the instructions that are in the code sheet, the lab sheet, it should work just like it did for me. All right, and that's it for today.